Panama. A humid night in 2015. Ancient stone ruins lit by open fire, and half-naked performers moving through the smoke like ghosts. At a state dinner for the most powerful leaders in the hemisphere, the richest young man in the room leans over and whispers a question. Why are there naked people at a state dinner? The man is Mark Zuckerberg. He runs a company that now shapes what billions of people see, believe, and rage about. And he's been seated at the worst table in the room because he isn't a head of state. The woman beside him quietly slips his name card into her handbag, so no one will notice the snub. Her name is Sarah Wynn-Williams. She talked her way into a job that didn't exist to help this company win the world. She's about to watch it break things it can never put back. This is the story of how the brightest promise of our time curdled into what its own insider would call a lethal carelessness. And it begins with a 13-year-old girl bleeding in the back of a car. Long before Silicon Valley, there was a beach in New Zealand. Sarah is 13 when a shark takes her in its jaws and tries to drag her under. She would later write that a shark attack is like being hit by a knife attached to a freight train. She fights with everything she has and somehow reaches the sand alive, but the sea isn't finished. That night, infection floods her body. A doctor, certain she's dying, begins cutting into her arms and ankles without anesthetic in the haze. She believes she is being autopsied while still alive. She falls into a coma, and when she finally wakes, unable to speak, she reaches for a pen and writes 3 words to her mother. I saved myself. She decides she was spared for a reason, to change the world. Remember those 3 words. She is going to need them again. She becomes a diplomat, one of New Zealand's youngest at the United Nations, chasing that childhood promise to matter. But inside the UN, she finds gridlock, speeches, and nothing that actually moves. The breaking point is almost a joke. She watches a stunt built around the cartoon fish from a children's movie do more to rally the world for the oceans than years of careful negotiation. When a cartoon fish can outperform the United Nations, she decides it's time to go. Then she sees Facebook, not the college toy, but the machine spreading across the planet, connecting people no government ever could. To her, it doesn't look like a website. It looks like a revolution. And she asks herself the only question that matters to a true believer. What do you do when you see a revolution coming? Her answer? I will stop at nothing to be part of it. There's just one problem. Facebook doesn't want her. Facebook has no diplomats. It has engineers, growth teams, and a deep horror of anything that smells like government. So Sarah invents her own way in. She tracks down an executive named Martin Levine, finds a single mutual connection, and pitches a role that doesn't exist. Her entire case is 4 words. Facebook needs a diplomat. A company reaching into every country on Earth, she argues, is going to collide with every government on Earth. And right now, no one there speaks their language. It works. She builds Facebook's global public policy team almost from nothing, becoming the person who makes presidents and prime ministers feel that this strange new power is on their side. For a while, it is intoxicating. She's flying the world, opening doors, spreading the gospel of connection. She just hasn't noticed yet what the company actually worships. What it worships is written on the walls. Move fast and break things. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. When Sarah asks what Facebook truly stands for, the honest answer she keeps hearing is blunt. Growth. More. And the money arrives in tidal waves. She watches colleagues flash the red soles of $1,000 shoes like a secret handshake, a little red badge of who now belongs. She tells herself the wealth is just a side effect, that the mission is still the mission. But the mission and the money are quietly trading places. The people at the top are beginning to move through the world as though the rules, the borders, the consequences were all for someone else to worry about. She doesn't have the phrase for it yet. A dead novelist already did. The phrase comes from The Great Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote of his richest characters that they were careless people. They smashed up things and creatures, then retreated back into their money and let other people clean up the mess they had made. Sarah will spend years deciding that this is the truest description of the people she works for. The first real chill comes in an email after a terror attack dominates the news. A note from the top observes, coolly, that the tragedy is good for business, with the public frightened about security. The conversation about privacy is now, in effect, dead. No outrage, no grief, just an opportunity. Sarah reads it and feels something shift under her feet. These are not villains twirling mustaches. They are something harder to fight. People so insulated by power that other people's suffering barely registers as real. Nowhere is that insulation clearer than Davos, the Swiss mountain summit where the richest people alive gather to congratulate one another. Sarah calls it the Hunger Games for the top 100th of 1%. She's there with a sick baby she's half smuggled in, running on no sleep, while billionaires trade status like currency in a quiet side room. She watches a deal take shape, how to route Facebook's profits through Ireland to shrink its tax bill toward nothing, discussed with a sitting prime minister as casually as a dinner order. Sarah starts taking notes, and a voice beside her, one of the most admired women in business, says simply, "Sarah, stop taking notes." That's the moment she understands the real rule of this world. The powerful don't fear being wrong. They fear being written down. Back at headquarters, the carelessness stops being about money and becomes about power itself. In a board meeting, Sarah listens as the company weighs how to keep governments off its back, and someone floats offering Facebook's political campaigning tools to Europe's rising far-right parties. The movement's built on anti-immigrant rage. Head off regulation. The logic runs by helping the very forces that feed on division. Sarah can't stop herself. She's caught rolling her eyes. And then a senior executive says the quiet part out loud, naming the industry they're starting to resemble. Tobacco, a product that hooks people, harms them at scale, and hires the best minds in the world to keep the machine running. No one in the room disputes it. They simply move on to the next item on the agenda. That, Sarah realizes, is how it actually happens. Not with a decision, but with a shrug. The higher Sarah climbs, the more the power turns personal. On a private jet home from Davos, heavily pregnant and exhausted. She's told there is only one bed, and in her account, a superior repeatedly insists she come and lie down in it. Come to bed. Everyone else on the plane finds somewhere else to look. Sarah stays in her seat. Later on the rain-soaked tarmac, the same person leans in with a line that lands like a threat wrapped in silk. You should have gotten to bed. It is the memoir's portrait of a world where the ordinary boundaries between a boss and an employee, between a favor and a demand, simply dissolve at a certain altitude of wealth. And Sarah is learning that saying no to these people is never free. It will be remembered. There is another cost she is beginning to pay. Sarah alleges that a powerful policy chief, the man who sits above her, makes her workplace steadily more humiliating. During, of all things, her United States citizenship test, she says he emails to ask whether she got a crude, degrading question that he has invented. Other remarks follow. She writes, a jab about a sugar daddy, a comment that she hadn't touched anything precious. She is telling it as she remembers it. The company would later investigate the man and clear him. But in the moment, Sarah feels the walls narrowing. The idealist who once believed she could change the world from the inside is discovering how little protection idealism actually buys, and how the same men shaping the speech of billions can treat the woman 2 doors down as barely human. Then comes the second near death of her life, giving birth. Sarah suffers a catastrophic complication. Her body floods with amniotic fluid. Her blood refuses to clot, and she needs more than 30 transfusions just to stay alive. She slips toward a coma again, machines breathing for her, torn from her newborn daughter. Certain she is dying. She is 13 once more, fighting a sea that wants to pull her under, and she survives again. I saved myself, only to find that even this, her body breaking to make a life, does not pause the machine. Work keeps scheduling itself into the gap where her recovery should be. The company that sells the whole world on family and connection cannot, it turns out, make room for either. Something in her allegiance is cracking now, and the world is about to crack along with it. November 2016. Sarah walks into the office the morning after Donald Trump wins, and the room is in shock. Young staffers crying at their desks, the air thick with a question no one wants to say aloud. Because for months, the platform has run on outrage hoaxes and rage dressed up as news, and people are already calling it the Facebook election. One employee finally asks it, "Is it our fault?" Meanwhile, the executive Sarah alleges harassed her stands among the leadership, visibly, cheerfully pleased with the result. The meeting is shut down before the question can breathe. Two worlds are hardening inside one company, the people frightened by what they've built, and the people already counting what it's worth. And at the very top, the answer to, is it our fault, is being decided for everyone. It is going to be no. Days later, on a conference stage, the founder gives his verdict. The idea that fake news on Facebook could have tipped an election, he says, is a pretty crazy idea. Pretty crazy. Sarah knows what lives in the internal numbers, what the company can actually see about how its own machine amplifies lies. And she watches the most powerful voice in the room wave all of it away. Not because he is certain he's right, but because being right would be inconvenient. This is the pattern she can no longer unsee. When the truth threatens growth, the truth becomes the thing that gets moved fast and broken. But denial in America is one thing. Sarah is about to find a place where the same carelessness is measured not in headlines, but in human lives. First, though, she finds the files on China. Facebook is banned in China, and yet China is one of the company's largest sources of revenue, billions of dollars, roughly a tenth of the whole business, flowing from a country whose own people cannot even open the app. Sarah discovers why the company wants back in so badly, and what it is willing to build to get there. A secret project, code-named after an astronaut, to create a version of Facebook the Chinese government could control, an emergency switch that could erase content across an entire region at once, a tool that automatically flags any post spreading past 10,000 views, quietly tested where dissent runs hottest. Even the scaffolding for the kind of surveillance an authoritarian state can only dream of. The company that told the world it existed to connect humanity had drawn up the blueprints for the exact opposite and hidden them. Buried in those plans, Sarah finds a single sentence that stops her cold. The company's own internal document admits, in writing, that storing user data inside China could make Facebook employees responsible for responses that lead to death, torture, and incarceration. Death, torture, incarceration. Their words about their own product. And what happens to that sentence? It is softened, edited down, managed away, until the horror is filed behind gentler language and the project rolls on. This, Sarah understands, is what carelessness looks like from the inside. Not a monster's decision, but a careful little edit. A line quietly deleted so that no one has to feel it. The mess, exactly as Fitzgerald wrote, left for other people to clean up. And soon, a country most of her colleagues could not find on a map is going to pay that bill in full. By 2018, the pressure reaches Washington, and the founder is called to testify before the United States Senate. When a senator presses him on doing business with China, he delivers a line that has clearly been prepared in advance. Respectfully, "Senator," he says, "that is an unfair comparison," and he resents the implication that doing business in China is akin to abetting crimes against humanity. It is a small masterpiece of wounded dignity. Sarah, who has seen the actual files, watches it and reaches a two-word conclusion. He lies. And here's the detail she wants you to sit with. After the testimony, after the denials, the outrage, the crazy idea dismissals, Facebook's stock price goes up, the market has rendered its verdict. Carelessness, performed well, pays, but no performance can reach the place this story is heading next. Myanmar, a country coming online for the very first time and for millions of people. Facebook isn't part of the internet. It is the internet. Sarah watches the company celebrate the growth. What it does not do is prepare for it. As hatred against the Rohingya Muslim minority spreads across the platform, as a cruel slur multiplies and an extremist monk gathers a following, Facebook has, by her account, almost no one who can even read the language. One overworked contractor for a nation of tens of millions. The software can barely display the local script. Warnings arrive again and again from people on the ground begging the company to act. Remember the promise to hire hundreds, even thousands, to break into China? For Myanmar, there is a shrug, and the posts stay up. In 2017, the violence becomes a catastrophe. The military drives more than 700,000 people from their homes. The United Nations will call it genocide and will point in part, at the platform that let the hatred travel so fast. Sarah does not call it evil. She calls it something she believes is worse, precisely because it is so much more common: a lethal carelessness. These were, she writes, sins of omission. Not the terrible things they did, but the ordinary things they simply could not be bothered to do. The country, she concludes, would have been better off if Facebook had never arrived there at all. And this is what the phrase from Gatsby finally means. Careless people, operating at the scale of the whole earth, don't just smash up things, they smash up lives by the hundreds of thousands, and then retreat back into their money and let other people bury the dead. So Sarah tries to do the one thing the company forever claims to value. She speaks up. She formally reports the man she alleges harassed her, and she is not alone. Other women are quietly comparing notes, realizing how many of them are carrying their own version of the same story. But speaking up inside a machine built on loyalty is like shouting into a vacuum. Her attempt to move to a different team is blocked. An investigation, she says, clears the man above her. And slowly she grasps the trap she is in. The very power that let these people ignore Myanmar is the power that lets them ignore her. The careless are never held to account by the systems they themselves control. If accountability is ever going to come, it will not come from inside the building, which is precisely why she has to be pushed out of it. The end, when it comes, is wrapped in bureaucracy, moments into what is dressed up as a routine performance review. Sarah is fired. The reason given? That she didn't hire people quickly enough. Even though her hires had been blocked from above, her laptop is taken. She isn't allowed back to her desk. A security guard walks her out of the building she helped build, past all that open-plan idealism, and into the parking lot. The woman who talked her way in through a door that didn't exist is escorted out through one that locks behind her. On her way in, that final week, she had even been swarmed by wasps at a gate, stung through a white dress, as though the place itself were spitting her out. She came to change Facebook. In the end, Facebook changed her. So what happened to the careless people? Nothing. Or rather, they rose. The executive Sarah accused climbed higher, becoming one of the founder's most trusted lieutenants. The company changed its name from Facebook to Meta and turned the page, as if a fresh logo could wash the old ledger clean. But leopards, Sarah writes, don't change their spots. The founder announces that he is done apologizing. The pattern she watched up close has not broken. It has hardened into a law she can finally state plainly. The more power these people grasp, the less responsible they become. They smashed things, retreated into their fortunes, and left the rest of us standing in the wreckage of an information world we now all live inside. And Sarah decides she will not become one more person who saw it and stayed silent. Remember the 13-year-old who woke from a coma and wrote, "I saved myself"? She is still in there. Barred from the room, Sarah does the one thing the careless truly fear. She writes it all down. She files a whistleblower complaint with regulators. She backs efforts by shareholders to force the company to answer for itself. She helps pass a law protecting workers who break their silence, so that the next person who sees something can't simply be gagged by a contract. She cannot save Myanmar. She cannot undo an election or unbuild the machine, but she can refuse the one thing every careless empire quietly depends on, that the people who see the truth will decide it is easier to look away. Once, a knife attached to a freight train could not silence her. Neither, it turns out, can this. And she ends not with revenge, but with a warning meant for you. Because the same people with the same carelessness are no longer only deciding what appears in your feed. They are racing to build artificial intelligence to wire it into weapons, to win a contest with China in which the losing move could be catastrophic and impossible to take back. The habits Sarah watched break a country, move fast, deny everything, let someone else clean up the mess, are now being aimed at the most powerful technology human beings have ever made. She is telling us all of this not because it is history, but because it is a rehearsal. We have already seen how the last revolution was handled. The next one is already here. Careless People is not really a book about Facebook. It is a book about what happens when we hand the world to people who were never asked to be careful and who discover that carelessness, at their scale, costs them nothing. Sarah Wynn-Williams walked in as a believer and walked out as a witness, carrying the one thing they could not confiscate, the truth of what she had seen. We are, she says, living inside the world these careless people shaped, and their lethal carelessness did not end when her story did. Her final warning is simple, and it is addressed to every one of us. If we don't reckon with what was covered up, we will repeat it. Only this time, the stakes are too high. A 13-year-old girl once saved herself. Now she is asking whether the rest of us will.